All right, hello everyone. I'm here with my friend Redwood, and this is a part of our series of sharing various conversations that relate to the upcoming EA conference. And we're going to do something today that is very exciting. Um, I've never done this before, and this just feels like fun. So, before I introduce the talk, Redwood, you're going to be speaking about house planet sign synthesis in the natal chart. So this is one of those talks where you're going to the basics, like the very core. How do you approach interpreting planets and signs and houses? I'm very excited about this talk because we can learn all these advanced things, but it's so helpful to ground ourselves in the basic of the basics. And I think one of the most common beginners questions that I get from my students is, how do you interpret it all together? Do you start with the planet? Do you start with a house? Do you start with a sign? So let's just start talking about that. Speak to us a little bit about, how do you approach planet sign house synthesis in the natal chart?
Yeah, hi. It's so good to be here. Thanks. I will say that I had studied, I guess, what's called Western astrology for maybe 11 years, 12 years before I got into evolutionary astrology. And I wasn't sure how to approach it then, to be honest. So I embraced the paradigm that was taught on the message board, and that's really through reading Pluto 1 and then using the message board and learning through threads with Rad and the students who were on there at that time. That's how I learned. And I very much go house. I'm like a house first person. Like that's one of my EA mantras is house first, phase first, you know. And so I always strip the chart down in my head to considering what does this planet in this house mean, and then I'll add the sign.
So why would you
Um,
say it's helpful to start with the house?
oh, that's a great question. I mean, it's like, to me, it's the most, it's where it's happening.
Hmm.
Um, it's the, there's different ways of saying it, I guess. If it's happening in the seventh house, it's about our relationship with other people or how we are in relationship. Like that's the
Right,
bottom line. Like
right.
regardless of what sign or planet is there, it's about relationship needs and what's happening. And so it gives to me, it's like it just gives the context for the area of life that is going to be affected. Um, period.
I like that, and that's how I perceive it too, and that's like the basic orientation that's been taught in EA. You think of the house as the essence, right? It's just that's where everything is happening. So whatever you got going on in the seventh house, in the seventh house, you're in the area of life experience that corresponds to relationships in general. And that just provides the basic framework, the basic context for whatever evolutionary activity is going on. So you work with the planet in the house, and then you add the sign, or do you do the kind of the planet and the sign together?
At this point, I don't have like my mind just synthesizes,
Yeah.
but if I slow myself down, I will remove the sign sometimes and just be like, what does it mean that someone's moon is in the seventh house? Like, what are the core issues happening here? And then add the sign, and like that just helps a lot, I think, if we can sequence it like that.
Yeah. That's something that I share with my students often, that really there's no actual order because it's all there at the same time. But from a pedagogical point of view, um, oftentimes I'll start with doing the sign in the house just to get a flavor for, like, what's Virgo in the seventh all about, and then adding the planet. But then sometimes, what's the general nature of, Venus in the seventh, and then add Virgo. So yeah, I think it's helpful for students, especially those that are just starting off, to have a sort of a technique or a basic framework for approaching this stuff, but then to hold it loosely, because we just need to be able to grasp and intuitively work with it all together ultimately. So, in your talk, how are you going to be approaching this and teaching this for everyone?
Oh gosh, I think a lot. a lot of it will start with some of the basic things that we haven't maybe broken down the chart to be that naked, and then comparing and contrasting some of these, like just planet, how a planet would play out in this house versus that house, and then adding signs to those, and say, well, okay, now let's say that planet is in the same sign, but it's in this house versus this house.
Oh, brilliant.
So starting with some of that kind of comparison, contrasting, and building, but also running through scenarios of just planets and houses, and then going from there into different scenarios. Um, I think um, I'll just say that like the goal of the talk too is to kind of stay simple and really kind of ground into some of these archetypal combinations. And if I'm teaching astrology, like one of the things I always bring up is like you've got to consider the meaning of the house in total too. And so
Hmm.
the planet on the house cusp, the sign on the house cusp could be different than the sign that the planet is in the house. So if you have Leo on the seventh, it's a Leo ruled house. Um, that's significant, even though you've got Virgo planets in there or something, for
Right,
example.
right.
Um,
So
but
just to clarify what you're saying to that, and actually I'll pull up a little chart here so we can all see this as we're talking. Um, a friend from I forgot what her name is Susan. I forgot what country she is. Maybe Australia. She created this amazing graphic. I don't know if you know about it. It's free, available for everyone, where you can kind of pull up the planets and put them anywhere you want. So you're just saying like,
oh,
right? So you're
yeah,
talking about, let's
nice.
say we have, Jupiter in Virgo in the seventh. You're talking about, okay, Jupiter's in Virgo in the seventh, but then the seventh house is ruled by Leo, right?
Yep,
So will you say a little bit more about how does that change our understanding of Virgo in the seventh?
that's great. Oh yeah, I
Isn't that
I
cool?
mean, I love that. I love that. I Because the seventh in this case would be ruled by Leo, there's going to be a whole story around relationships that also correlates to the sun in the chart.
Mm.
And there's going to be core relationship themes around expressing oneself in relationship and being seen. And like all of that is going to go back to what's the story of the sun in the chart. And so when you get into the Jupiter in Virgo in the seventh house, it's like if you can synthesize those two things, that gets complicated. But um, like to me, that would be a great foundational base of starting with. Like you're looking at Jupiter in Virgo in the seventh, we're already combining those three things. And the next thing to do to me would be contextualizing the seventh house with the sun as the ruler.
Yeah, and it can get very complicated, and I think a lot of students, not necessarily in a useful way, jump too quickly, in my opinion, to that step.
Mm-hmm.
And I often try to say, just start with planet sign house. Don't worry about if the house is ruled by another sign. But down the road, that becomes, for those that are ready to kind of apprehend that, we don't want to add in more linear pieces. Then we're able to intuitively, on a Jupiter Sagittarius level, synthesize. But the sign on the house and its ruler conditions the entire activity of whatever's happening in that house. So it is a very helpful thing. So that's cool. And I wanted to come back to something you said. So you're going to be addressing that a bit. You also shared you're going to speak to, um, let's say we have Jupiter in Virgo in the seventh, and then you're saying like now put that over here in its opposite,
But
things like
also
that.
in Virgo.
Oh, in Virgo. So now move Virgo. We did Virgo in the seventh. Now let's do Virgo in the first. That is great.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
right, because like the thing is sometimes like we can get stuck in understanding how a Jupiter in Virgo in the seventh is different than a Jupiter in Virgo in the first.
Right.
But like that's the whole premise of the Pluto book is like the house that Pluto is in first. I just and a lot of times we just don't translate that fully, where it's just like yeah, but like what house is the moon in, kind of like,
Right.
um, because a Leo moon in the second is going to be really different than a Leo moon in the eighth.
Right. Absolutely. And I think for all of us as we're learning, we're going to find certain house archetypes just make more sense to us. So by looking at polarities, maybe we'll be able to fill in some of the blank spots, the parts that aren't totally clear. So that's great. Um, and you'll also be working with just unique nodal combinations and house sign combinations, like when Libra is ruling the first house, for example, right? So you have all of the signs and the houses opposite each other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep, as we call it, the paradox chart. I think it adds a complex layer to understand the houses in these situations, because it's like Aries rules the seventh. Okay, like how do we find harmony and cooperation by doing Aries in relationship? And
Yeah.
so it's a little paradoxical, but it speaks to some greater story that the chart wants to share.
Shall we
No pun
start with
intended.
a few rounds of astrological dice?
Yeah.
Okay. So, how about you go first, and then I'll go.
Okay, I've got the sun, and
All
it's
right.
going to be it's in the third house, and then we get the sun here in Aquarius.
All right.
That's fun. Okay. Okay. So I'm starting us off.
Sure.
All right. Sun in Aquarius in the third. Okay. Uh, hmm. So,
Should we pick an evolutionary stage just to give a context?
um,
And if we do, that might be necessary to explain to our listeners exactly what that means. Let me just say this for everyone, because I know a lot of you may not be familiar with this concept, and I don't want you to feel like you have to be to watch any of these videos. The basic understanding is you can't look at a chart and just assume where the soul's at in their own evolution. You can have five people with the same chart, and each person is literally born into this world at a different level of self-realization, a different level of consciousness. So we always have to interpret the chart relative to the soul's reality and kind of connect with where are they at on their journey. To the Aquarius archetype, it's about liberation, evolution, acceleration of growth, liberation from the known, but that can express on different levels of self-knowledge. Right? That can express in a consensus reality where we're fitting into the normatives of society, right? And that could express on a spiritual dimension for those that are interested in their own spiritual growth. So it's just important to appreciate whenever we look at a chart, that is an underlying fundamental starting point context to be able to assess and connect with the soul itself before interpreting the chart. So, yeah, I'll let you decide on this one, however you want to lead it, if you want to
okay.
bring that in.
Um, that's a great question. Yeah, I see how this signature kind of immediately brings up evolutionary stage. I mean, everything kind of does, but
Hmm.
I'll probably just bring it up somewhat, but I'm not going to pick one
Okay.
because I can. I think I can speak to. Okay, so I mean, one of the things I think about the sun is, I mean, of course, in EA we think about the sun as our purpose in life. It's how we radiate, shine, and express in the world, and like the sun is the source of all life. Wherever the sun is in the chart, especially like by house, that's going to be an area of life where the individual has a certain amount of life force or vitality or um, yeah, they'll get energy from that experience, or that's like one of the ways I think about it, or that part of the house is kind of infused with a lot of life and energy and has a lot more expression. So going into the third house, all the realm of the mind and thought and communication is going to be a big part of their life. Like the sun in the third house, probably a talker, right? They need to express themselves verbally. They have a lot of ideas. They have a lot of thoughts. Um, they probably get a lot of energy from being in conversations, and it's just like somebody who's might want to be like at a cafe, like just talking and with their friends or something. Um, and then when you add the sign of Aquarius to this, I think that gets, I mean, Aquarius in the third can be very much an outside the box type of thinker. And I think, Ari, what you're saying off the get go is like, well, what's the box? And how far outside the
Mm,
box is one going to go with their concepts and ideas? Because if this individual was really individuating from the norms of culture and society, they could be way out there on some of the stuff they're expressing and saying. And these ideas would be like, whoa, this is like a little too crazy. But depending on where they, I mean, that's normal society speaking in response to it. But depending on where they're going, it's regardless, it's still going to be inventive. It's still going to be outside the box. Um, the and another thing about Aquarius is this certain objectivity. So it's like if somebody can speak, in a solar way, in a Sun Leo way that's full of expression, but then it's still objective. Um, there is this potential beauty in that signature. Um, However, it could also be like a little too fragmented and chaotic and sped up too. So you really kind of look at the individual on that day and where they are. And I mean, this is where you kind of get into like what is the greater story of the chart. Um, as in terms of life purpose, it could very much involve something to do with communications with this signature. That could play out in so many different ways though. And um, So yeah, I mean, relative to the consensus culture, I think that, all the things there's this kind of lens of like, well, what's normal for that culture to be said or to be expressed. And then within that normal, there's still an accepted, weird, unusual, outside the box. Jeffrey would talk a lot about how Aquarius in the consensus can also be this group of thinking that throws back to the past. So, kind
right.
of the outside, the box idea is like, let's do this thing that we did, 2 centuries ago. Like that's different. Um, yeah, it's. I mean, this is a great signature for someone. I think that could really. I mean, the thing about Aquarius is, yeah, to be able to liberate through speaking, to and to do it in an objective way. It's a really interesting signature to look at and see like what is being expressed. And a lot of times when I look at this, um, it leads me to a lot of questions, and I think that's like the reminder too as astrologers and students of astrology. We don't have to have the whole story, but if we start with the right questions, we're going to get some really interesting, observations fast.
That's great. I want to say two things. We're looking at the sun right now, and just to appreciate, whenever we're looking at the sun, it's always helpful to just kind of hold that space for, cool, this is this person's sun sign, That's relevant. Why do they have that sun sign? Why is that their life's purpose? The sun sign is such a powerful point of centralized focus and self actualization. There's so much confidence and energy that's needed wherever that sun sign is placed. So it's just really helpful to appreciate when we're dealing in this case with the sun, how, it's like sun sign astrology is very popular, but at the same time, it's almost, once you get into more of a spiritual lens of astrology, it's easy to forget the significance of the sun because we kind of jump to more of the existential Pluto outer planet type dynamics. Sun is so important. So I'll add a few dimensions to this. Um, Third house, as you're saying, corresponds to communication, dialogue, learning, and also how we're processing information, right? The self actualization for this soul is to liberate from the existing mental and logical frameworks that they're familiar with. And they're going to need to actualize themselves. So, just as much as they might enjoy socializing with friends in a cafe, they might feel very stifled by that. They may not relate to how other people are thinking. They might be very happy being their own iconoclastic thinker, researching or thinking of ideas that no one's thought of before, that they've never thought of before. And it's basically about looking at the map from a bird's eye view. and cultivating more of a broad-minded understanding and objective perception of what's going on so that our thoughts about reality aren't so subjective and limited to the day-to-day ideas and constructs that we run in our mind. Just seeing it from a higher perspective. So an example of this would be a soul that is seeking to actualize themselves in this lifetime through studying and collecting knowledge of anything like the stars or plants or anatomy or science of any kind and categorizing it broadly enough that we're able to grasp through a great field of data and information a more holistic, objective understanding of how all of these things work together. It's like looking through a telescope and observing and collecting data because you're looking without a preconceived idea of what it is you're supposed to find, as opposed to most people would look through the telescope and have a whole bunch of existing ideas of what they're looking for and what they're supposed to find. If we think of this on a soul who's on a spiritual stage of evolution, this has so much to do with liberation of the mind, like freeing oneself from conditioned thinking. It's like the mind is always kind of running in thought, seemingly on its own, seemingly without our consent, and it's cultivating more of an observer consciousness and learning how to kind of sit at the center of one's higher intelligence and observing the thoughts that are coming and going, but not identifying with them. And this soul will then be able to see reality a lot more clearly. And they're going to be less likely to jump on the next thought. They're going to be less likely to just believe in the different opinions or ideas that are being shared all around oneself. Writing, communicating, explaining things, categorizing, articulating. This would be a great podcast or someone who's expressing themselves through broadcasting new ideas to people, writing articles, blogging, videos, writing content that is liberating for the mind, things like that. Creative, so, Sun in the third house is creative writing or creative articulation. In Aquarius, it's happening through the individuation of the mind, the freedom of the mind.
Yeah, thank you, Ari. Love all that. Yeah, the thing with the sun is like I think the beautiful thing is that with this paradigm for me is that and and going to the place of the house and sign like this is like sometimes we don't give ourselves permission to think as simply as the archetypes are speaking. So it's
Mm,
like if you're growing up and someone says to you, yeah, what if your whole purpose in life is just to objectively um, bring into expression what's coming through the mind.
I love that.
Um, like it's just like we think. I mean, I think like a lot of times with the sun, we think like the life purpose has to be something that in this culture, there's this conditioning around manifestation and purpose, and in the third house, this is kind of an air sign, Aquarius third, and so if we don't have a tangible form or path or some like manifested thing in the world that's like here's the trophy, here's the results of my purpose in life, um, sometimes it can be hard to fully embrace that or honor that, and this kind of gives us a chance to step back at a really base level and honor the soul's purpose in a way that's like, like if you're doing that, that's great. Like
I love that.
we're not going to take anything with us when we go except you know the experiences and lessons.
So appreciate you speaking to that. And that's such an important sun sign teaching. It's not about the glory or magnetism of something that looks flashy and important or that makes you important. It's definitely not necessarily about your career or your role or what you're doing as a life path in that sense, so to speak. It's how you're radiating, it's how you're being, it's how you're actualizing and centralizing your life experience fundamentally at the core of your being. And it requires self-entitlement to create, to make life happen, to exist, to actualize, have confidence in yourself and your unique presence, but it doesn't have to be qualified by a particular flashy expression. It's a very important sun sign teaching. Shall we go to another example?
All right. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, let's do another
All
one.
right.
And I'll lead this one.
We got let's see. Uranus. Okay.
Okay.
Good. It's in the ninth. Sorry, limited space, and it's in Cancer.
All right, cool.
That's like a, a boomer signature.
It is, yeah, yeah. Second Uranus, and no, that was Neptune in Cancer. That's both a boomer signature, actually.
Has Uranus been? Oh wait, no, it hasn't gone. But yeah, so it's just the hasn't
Okay.
gone back yet. Hasn't gone to Gemini yet.
So what I'm going to do for this one is I'll be a little bit more performative, and I'm going to embody and be a couple different expressions or possibilities of this signature before I go into the left brain stuff. That feels a little more fun for me in this moment. I was born in the South to a very traditional family with family values and raised to believe in Jesus, my Lord and Savior. But early on, I was really interested in Eastern spirituality. And I really wanted to go on this journey, but I was afraid, it's so far away from everything that's familiar. But I had to be honest with myself. I just didn't feel like I belonged where I grew up. I didn't belong with my church, with my religion, and no one really understood me, and I felt like an outsider. So I went on a plane and I found my guru and I went to an ashram, and had my first spiritual experience there with my guru, and did a lot of meditation, and it really opened my mind. So that's just one expression. Um, Not trying to make fun of Southerners or anything, but that's just me trying to act. The idea is we're liberating from the familial context of the cosmological world that is known to us. I mean, Cancer is what's known in the most intimate sense. Okay, here it's manifesting in the ninth house. This is your understanding of reality, your cosmology, the way in which you're experiencing life as a pilgrimage for ongoing realization. Here, there's a sense of we're needing to liberate from anything that is emotionally inauthentic, right? You might be believing things, or it's the beliefs you were fed growing up, but does it resonate with your own identity? Is it true for you? So this really highlights emotional authenticity, where the spiritual journey has to be grounded and conditioned, informed by really knowing oneself from within, even if that has no context with one's familiarity, with one's emotional imprinting, with how one was nurtured, right, at the core of their being. Because this manifesting here in the ninth house says you might feel very alienated relative to your culture, your spirit, the spiritual culture, the religion, the belief systems that you grew up in. And you have to be able to embrace what is unfamiliar and unknown to you by way of being completely sincere and authentic. And you might find some roots or familiarity far away, right? Somewhere completely other than you've been. Or to take it in a different way, maybe you're not needing to travel anywhere. The key is to liberate yourself from belief systems. And liberating yourself from belief systems might mean facing, well, this is all I've known my entire life, right? Your belief system could equal the smell of the church that you grew up in, right? Like the Cancer feel, the hug, the warm blanket of the familiarity of the known. But there needs to be a sense of, I only can know what is directly realized through my own ongoing experience, not through any kind of religious cosmological framework or belief system. And that's one example, right? Another example, right, can be you are, um, who is it? Prince, I believe. No, Prince had Leo he had Uranus and Leo in the ninth house, but he converted to Mormonism. But just you can find home in a religion that is completely seemingly out of the blue, a context that you didn't grow up with. It seems totally out of connection to any of your own familiarity. The idea is the authenticity to walk one's path and not look to precedent, not look to one's familiarity as a sign for where one is going with their own life. Those are some starting points. What would you add to that?
I love that. Thank you. I think, well, this is kind of, this can be potentially really, I mean, Uranus can be hard wherever it is in the chart, but like in this case, I like one of the things I think about the ninth house is relative to the third house, Gemini and Mercury, we take in all this information from the world constantly from day one. And then in the ninth house, this ninth house Sag Jupiter archetype speaks to how we form meaning. And so the ninth house, in a sense, is like the story that we're telling ourselves every day when we wake up. Like, this is the story of my life. Um, and that story is going to change, especially if you have Uranus in the ninth house. And so, if you think about the concept of Cancer in the ninth house, that there's some emotional security in having one story, of like a way that we interpret life that makes sense. But to have that like upended on you,
Hmm.
because Uranus is going to disrupt that, that's this, it's going to be this great challenge to one's security and identity of that is connected to how you believe life plays out, the meaning and the story that you've been telling yourself. So it could be extremely disruptive. So, like a little example, kind of similar to a story that you're saying, is like, let's say this is a consensus soul, and at some point they're let's say they grew up in Roman Catholicism. At some point, they have this moment where they realize this isn't for them. It's not going to be a small moment. It's going to be huge. And maybe, like from the outside, the nutshell of the story is they became a Methodist. You know, like they still stayed within the consensus religion, but
Right.
like what we would know with this signature is it would be like it would kind of be shocking. It would be this huge moment of like how they interpreted the world is kind of like turned upended, and it's like, now what do I believe? Now who am I in terms of Cancer, my identity that relates to like everything that I believe and know and say already understand. Because it's like you're changing how you understand the world and the lens that you're seeing it through. And so with this signature, to go back to evolutionary stages, I think we kind of really have to say like how secure is somebody to constantly be able to shift and
Mm.
change the lens of perception and the ways that they make sense of reality. There's going to be some profound resistance to that because you're going to be secure with the story that you know
Right.
to be like, this is life, this is what I know. And then you're like, guess what? It's not. Like, what do you do with that? Um, but yeah, if it's an individuating person, like we know that they're definitely going to be rebelling against all the norms of religion and like, don't tell me what my story is, don't tell me what my truth is, like you're going to find that for yourself. And there could be, because it's Cancer in the ninth, there could become a really strong identity in individuated around their own unique paradigm and what they've embraced. There could be attachment to the different path. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just like phenomenal. It's
I love how you mentioned earlier, just it's important to appreciate with Uranus, especially in this case in Cancer, the immense insecurity in questioning one's beliefs. So for many souls, this will be completely resisted, or maybe the liberations will happen in small doses, but still within the framework of the known, right? So you're within the particular, cosmological framework that you're conditioned by, that you're familiar with, that you grew up with, but maybe finding some reinterpretations within it, right? Like I realized I found a verse right here that actually creates a little more freedom or a little more tolerance, as opposed to letting go of the entire doctrine, right? Or completely changing your cosmological view. We're going to allow the impulse for liberation to be released through our system to wake us up, to the extent that we're feeling secure enough to allow that. And for many souls, that is repressed necessarily so because it's like we can't run that circuitry, so to speak. It would be too much of a break from the known reality. And so we still need to hold on to the known, but make little changes within that.
I mean, it's interesting. Like, imagine somebody who's more consensus in the 60s, but they like took acid and this is their
Right.
chart, and it kind of like shattered their
Hmm.
perception of reality. What's actually going to happen
That
in
is
the
their chart. A lot of
psyche?
people will have that signature. Yeah.
Like, it might not end well in this scenario. Like, if their consciousness wasn't ready to handle that. So you can kind of see stuff like that sometimes.
So glad you mentioned that. I mean, as a boomer, this is a very common dynamic. 1 out of 12 boomers will have had archetypally that applies, right? Um, this is that experience of suddenly the whole world that I'm perceiving is very different than the 1950s black and white, television screen that I believed existed, and everything shatters. It makes me think about actually, well, Ram Dass had Pluto in Cancer in the first house, but squaring Uranus, in fact, didn't he? Yeah, yeah, he had Uranus in Aries in the 10th, squaring Pluto in Cancer. So some of these themes, emerge. Just the contrast of him, all the phases that he went through in life, and then coming back to his father's home and hosting, Eastern spiritual practices and retreat on that land reminds me very much of that. Cool. There was one more fun thought that I had about the signature. Oh yeah, no, I don't know if it's fun, but just in terms of, of trauma, this could be the trauma of I was swimming naked in the water and I was told that I can't go to church anymore. That's wrong. It's bad. It's unnatural. It's not holy. It's not pure, right? Cancer in the ninth is being natural. There actually might be a draw towards nature itself, and how does nature live? Like what's the natural way in which um, peop the animals and the plants and all the beings in nature just live, right? Naturally.
Oh,
And there's a sense with Cancer in the ninth of wanting to live naturally and wanting to know oneself and relate to oneself from within in a way that's natural and authentic and uncontrived. So the experience of kind of realizing that the body is normal and being naked is normal and it's not necessarily a sexual thing or a bad thing, it's just natural. And then being told that you don't belong or that's not okay, right? There can be imprints like that that might be very traumatizing for the soul, but can also be, the impetus for facing the necessity for individuation and finding one's way. Or just like um, being able to differentiate between all kinds of beliefs and ideas. And you can tell when a person's sharing an idea and it's not known, it's just what they're comfortable with. And speaking the truth, and then speaking the truth might get you kicked out, right? Might alienate you from the group. This can be a spiritual group of people, right? Your church or your ashram or your spiritual group that you're with, a lot of
yeah,
liberation in being true to oneself.
yeah. It kind of, I mean, that is a signature of like, can you stand as the group of one? Are you secure to speak your truth when it
Yeah.
is different than the truth? And going off of what you were just saying, um, um, to nurture is nature, to nurture is natural. Kind of like this concept that natural law has the the feminine in it in this healthy way, and this is a religious trauma signature potentially going back to the trauma piece, and it's exactly what you're saying right there, for sure. Is patriarchal religions often are so rigid and harsh that they're not caring and supportive and nurturing in these ways, and obviously like the divine feminine still comes in form in a variety of ways, but that could be a big part of the trauma, is that connected with there's nothing supportive about this. Like this is just so harsh, and like I'm just internalizing all of this
Right.
things. And so, um, yeah,
This signature also reminds me of some of the earlier like 60s, 70s, oftentimes very Christian, back to the earth birthing movements, right? Women giving birth naturally on their own, just the way everyone else in nature does it. But sometimes even being associated with more religious, spiritual movements, things like that, as opposed to like the cosmology of the mainstream around liberating from the story of women. Cancer ninth house is one other facet of that, right? Um, Stories around the feminine that actually distort what's natural.
yeah, yeah. And one more thought on this to go
Yeah,
really big picture with it. It is, like ninth house is our journey. Like all souls were on a journey in a sense, and this kind of concept of Uranus in the ninth is like we all have our own journey. We all have our own individual, unique, authentic path that will lead us back to self, to source, to authentic ways of being. And it's in Cancer, so it's like, how is this person becoming secure in their own unique path and journey in
beautiful.
life? Because it's
Well
not gonna,
said.
you can't look at another person's path with this and be like, oh, that's my path. You kind of have to follow it, find your own way. um,
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Should we do one more, maybe?
yeah, we could. I have time for one more if you
Let's
do.
do just one more. And
Okay.
for everyone watching, you can like also ask a question to the universe and let this one be an answer for you, or any of these. What do I need to know right now?
Okay. Jupiter in the 10th in Virgo. Oh, we had a Jupiter in Virgo thing at the start. That's funny.
Yeah,
It's full circle. Am I taking the lead on this one?
sure, sure.
Whew. Okay, Jupiter in the 10th in Virgo. Okay, so yeah, in the spirit of this exercise, and for all of you out there, if you're listening, I mean, it's like I'll look at this sometimes, and I think like Ari, maybe your mind is different. Like, so I don't know, like, but for me, a lot of times, like my mind is slow to go in, and then it starts like the threads kind of start coming, and so to
I
reel
have,
back.
I have the sun in Sagittarius conjunct Uranus in the third house, so I have difficulty slowing down. I
uh,
admire how I feel, how grounded you feel, just so you know. Yeah.
so yeah, and this is kind of like in Virgo, like to actually like this is what I'm saying is totally Jupiter in Virgo. It's like I don't want to feel inadequate in my own learning style, but like I have to take things slow in my own way of processing sometimes and be like, okay, what is, that actually right there is a Jupiter in Virgo thing for sure. Is like your own learning style is going to be Virgo in nature. Like you're going to really be analyzing and breaking things down. But first, let's go back to Jupiter in the 10th house and what that means. I mean, it's first of all, it's paradoxical in and of itself because Jupiter is this expansion principle, and 10th house is, the Saturn contracting principle. Um, but yeah, so it's like you can immediately jump to be like, oh, this person's a teacher or something. They've got Jupiter in the 10th house. I would say, like that another thing you could say is like whatever work, role, or responsibility that they find themselves in, that um, they really believe Jupiter, that, like that is a process where you're helping people in your service of some kind, Virgo, right? Um, but at the peer Jupiter in the 10th, there's this idea that um, there is expansion and growth within the confines of the routines and the structure of our life in and of
Mm.
itself. And so if you take 10th house at a really broad level, it's like, what's the structure and the routines of your existence on the daily? And do those routines give you the opportunity to grow within them? You can kind of see this paradox. And I mean, 10th house can be kind of serious, or like, this is what we're facing, this is what we're working within. And so to have Jupiter there is, in a way, it's a beautiful signature, because it's just like, what ways can this structure continue to allow growth so that it continues to Virgo improve?
Hmm.
And so this kind of individual, I think, to me, would be really interesting to see like what they actually come to the table with. Virgo's naturally humble. They want to help. They want to see things improve. And so they're going to be taking that on as like, this is part of my role. Like, I'm here to work together and see how this can expand, how this can grow, how can it in expand in functionality. And it's a double Earth signature, so to speak, 10th house Virgo. So this can be really practical. I mean, someone with a signature, like, we need these people today. We're facing a crisis in stewarding the planet and resource management. And this kind of signature would be really probably great in that capacity, because you got to have some Jupiter optimism within the 10th house realities that we face and the limits that we're doing. And it's that kind of innovation of like, well, if we break it down and analyze it, what can we really learn about the reality that we face right now? And so you're going to see these themes come up with this.
That's great. So I like that you mentioned just Jupiter, which is very expansive and sort of opportunistic and optimistic, manifesting in a double Earth kind of situation. To me, it really speaks to this journey of ongoing growth and expansion, but grounded in ethic, humility, day to day, step by step, right action. This Jupiter wants to build something that's helpful, that's useful. It's manifesting in the 10th house. This is about responsibility and how we are contributing to society and the roles that we're meant to play, and how we're developing our own inner ethic, grounding ourselves in right alignment. So there's a sense of I'm expanding and I'm growing, whether that is in my own entrepreneurial career ambition, whether that is some kind of political purpose. There's a vision and some sort of growth, Jupiter, that I'm needing to work towards. But 10th house, it's going to be slow and I can't skip. It's like Jupiter in the 10th might be over opportunistic and, do whatever it can to get the promotion or get the job. There's a focus here on right action and being honest, not lying, not exaggerating things, really doing the hard work to grow and to achieve, or to achieve the outcomes that one is wanting in life. And that Virgo says this is happening through the Virgo way, through humility, through giving attention to all of the details. What are all the things that I need to work on? So if you're a teacher, there are many different projects or different dimensions or areas that need to be tended to. If you have your own business, there's all the different things you need to learn and apprentice with, study, practice, train, and improve upon in order to grow your business long term. You have to learn all kinds of skills: how to work the website backend, how to manage a store, how to fill out the right papers, how to clean the countertop. I mean, every little detail of being an adult becomes the container and the forum for self-development, the growth and the strengthening of one's maturity and responsibility and ability to tend to the work that one needs to do. And they can learn, it's like the Tao of slow and steady success, right? The Tao of integrity. Like, that's the kind of vibe that I get with this signature. There can be another issue. Um, Being stuck in a work environment that is degrading, where you feel very alienated. You're not really doing what you want to do, and you always want to be doing something else. Like Virgo in the 10th in general can be sort of busy, laborious work, right? Like working on the, in a, what's the word? Like on the line, tedious, check the thing, put the label on, mark it off, label it, go to your list, go to the next one, and it can be backbreaking and very hard. And the Jupiter element is, where are our beliefs keeping us limited or stuck in something that's degrading? Like the issue with Jupiter is we often actually are going to experience a very pessimistic, non-expansive reality because our beliefs and our outlook, our vision of life isn't really allowing us to grow into anything greater. So there might be a need to take some risks. Like, I really want to improve this business. I can do things differently. I have a new plan or a new vision. Let me take some time at night after work. I'm going to spend a few hours before I go to sleep and, go to bed at 1 o'clock a.m., studying these different things and learning more about business skills. I'm going to take the money that I have and go to business school so I can start my own business and have, to have an outlook that's going to put in the hard work to really get to where you want to in life and grow out of any kind of subservient conditions.
And to add to that is so like when you have Jupiter combined with Virgo, so like okay, Jupiter expanding, it's like the work just keeps growing, the list keeps getting longer, Virgo, right? So it's like when is there not work? When is there not more and more work to do? Um, so that can be one thing with this is just like it's just so much. There's just so much to do, and that combination of Jupiter and Virgo can be there can be this overwhelm with how much and how many details there is,
Hmm.
and relative to 10th house Saturn to get to like the certification, the mastery, um, or and like what's conditioned that belief Jupiter around like, oh yeah, that's success, 10th house. And so if somebody then feels inadequate and they have this signature, you can see like, okay, like are they doing this because they really want to improve, or is this an
Hmm.
overcompensation
Yeah.
for the feel like that they're like they believe that they're failing and not good enough, they haven't achieved, they haven't succeeded yet. So there's definitely things to look at with it because it's like, I mean, if there's ever a signature of, yeah, the list of responsibilities growing, and and if somebody in this with this signature takes on a project, I mean, there could be that moment of overwhelm. Like this could be their gift and talent too, is to see like, okay, I can see all the details and all the things and I can organize the work. But then it could also be like, whoa, and then it's more, and then it's more, and then it's like, okay, and then how are you going to cope with the fact that this project is now like way bigger than what you can handle?
Let's say they're a parent, right? Um, this can be,
Thank you.
there can be a total avoidance of really tending to the growing dysfunction. Bills aren't being paid on time. Um, kids aren't doing well in school. Um, you're coming home stressed. You're drinking. You're avoiding. You're not dealing with it. Your house is a wreck. The ground, the structural reality of your life is falling apart. And there can be a denial here, and that Jupiter in Virgo denial is a denial that's masked with a sort of like, I got it. I got it. I'm doing all right. I got to figure it out. Or no, no, tomorrow I'm gonna, I got this idea, this great idea. I'm gonna go out to the street and sell my book, and you're just never getting there. So there can be a sort of sobering and facing one's reality as it is,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
and being honest with oneself. It's like, things aren't working really. I got to change. I got to do something differently. I got to get real about what's going on and not just sort of be in denial.
That yeah, it's interesting. One of the things that came up with to thinking about this is this idea of like an imposter syndrome.
Yeah,
Like where does the psychology come from within that? And the person believes that like they have to improve so much, they have to do so more to be like achieve, you know, like being a good parent or succeeding in the world. And so, but if they're already working hard because they're already doing so much, but then within themselves they're like, yeah, but there's like so much more I've gotta do. They, it's possible that one doesn't believe or see themselves as the just like owning who they are of like you're doing it, you're in the role, like you don't have to
right.
feel like you're inadequate or you're not doing enough. But there could be some of that psychology of like why do I deserve recognition when like I'm not there actually or
A
something.
professional that's always taking more trainings and investing more time and money in professional development because they feel an underlying inadequacy in their skills and capacities in the first place. Yeah.
Yep, that could be a thing. Yeah. But it also could be healthy. Like they could be doing it because it's their natural way. And it's
Right.
like, great. You want to keep improving your skills. That's awesome. Like there's no shame or guilt or judgment about it, but
Right.
it's a question to pose to the individual is like, what, what really is going on psychologically for you? And is it just your natural way or are you compensating for something?
Cool.
This lack of you're just still not have accomplished it.
All right. Redwood, this was really fun. I hope this is also helpful, educational, insightful for everyone watching. Once again, the Evolutionary Astrology Conference is happening the first weekend of October. And let me just take everyone to the website so you can take a look at the page and just kind of just see all that's going on right around that. It's going to be Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 4 days of just really wonderful presentations. So check it out in the description below, and we hope to see you there. And do you have any closing thoughts or statements, Redwood?
Um, I'm super excited about the conference coming up. Last year, I just took off and I attended all of them, and it was great. In lieu of not being together in person, just totally submerging and getting that experience of. We've got so many great individuals. I'm super excited that you're all putting this on again for this year and to be part of it. And this was a lot of fun. I mean, I mean, I might not look like I'm having fun when I'm having fun, but I had a lot of fun today with you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I did as well. I enjoyed it. Okay.
um, thank
All
you.
right. Thank you, Redwood. Everyone, thank you so much for watching. Bye.